Good. Well, welcome to How to Be the Best Creative Director Ever. That's certainly the intent. But looking at this room, I would have to say this is like Rebecca and Kat's dream. This is like the 99% conference going the other way. So excellent to see. But good. So what Xanthe and I have done is just put together some thoughts. She and I have worked together for a number of years, and then she broke the agency's heart and left, and is doing her own thing now, and she'll tell you all about that. But I'm the Global Creative President of TBWA, and my name's Rob Schwartz, and I'll hand it over to Xanthe.
I'm Xanthe Wells, Chief Creative Officer of a little agency called Pitch down in Southern California. We were just acquired by Project Worldwide recently, so we were a boutique agency, independent for, I've been there 2 years, and we just now are part of a bigger thing. And I worked under Rob for 7 years, taught me everything I know, and I'm so grateful because every day I'm like, okay, I can draw from something I learned from him. And so I'm kind of here to share that transition and all of it.
So this could happen to you. All right, well, let's get into it.
I would say a creative director is a teacher, a leader, a partner, and also a creative.
Creative director is the punch bag and the lighthouse of the work.
The best ones teach you to survive without.
A really great creative director is a nurturer, person who mentors young people.
Someone that's a strong leader, someone that gives their teams the resources and the insight that they need to actually go and crack the brief.
It's about seeing beyond just what's put in front of you and finding the things within that that can really be amazing.
As a creative director, it is about the collective consciousness of an agency, because you're tasked with not only informing the work with clients or a strategic aspect of a project, but you're also informing the juniors who are coming up to get them up to a level.
I think you need to be very generous. So generous with time, generous with your ideas, you need to be willing to share. I think you need to be very decisive. You're there to make decisions, and good decisions if you can. If not, just make a decision. People need a direction to go in.
I think being a creative director, although my office has no door, is being with the team. It's helping them a lot.
The director part is also really important, and that's the real magic of when those two things start to blend. A great creative starts to learn how to be a great creative manager and bringing greatness out of other people and finding a lot of value.
To me, in my experience, great creative directors have always had a point of view, and that's something I think all creative people need, but I think particularly when you're a creative director, it's a big part of your job to have a point of view.
Some of the teams they don't want you there. Respect that. Get out and wait for them to come, but just be open to it.
I think a creative director also is someone who's curious about anything and who encourages all the team to always be curious.
If you have the chance to hire people, make sure you are aiming to hire people that are better than yourself.
I've always tried to hire people I think have more talent than me, and hire as many young people as you possibly can.
I think being a good creative director, it's a little bit like the Hippocratic Oath the doctors take, where it's first do no harm, and remembering that you can ruin an idea just as easily as you can make one better. So you remember that it's not about you, and you don't have to be the hero, and if somebody brings in something amazing, just letting it be amazing and not messing with it.
It isn't about them. They allow the work and the teams behind the work to blossom and grow, and it's very small egos would be a really key factor.
But just because you're a creative director doesn't mean you still can't make, but you have to start taking a little bit of a backseat, and part of your making is helping other people generate and make.
I'm no longer thinking about a TV spot or a print ad or a brand. I'm thinking about the collective of what I can contribute to the whole agency.
It has to be about the work and not the politics. It has to be about purely the work and getting to the best work.
All right. I guess we're done.
Yeah.
Do that. By the way, one of the things about a creative director is that you have to go on award shows and go to very exotic places like Malta, where Xanthe was. And,
Capturing footage.
She shot her peers, which is good. So one thing before we as we get into this, why us? I think one thing that's unique about our relationship is that I was a creative director at the agency, and I was working directly under Lee Clow. I'd worked for a lot of great creative directors. I'd worked for a guy named Tom Cordner at Team One. I worked for a brilliant woman in New York named Roz Green. She was my first creative director. So I'd seen a number of very good leaders of companies. And Xanthe, I think you came as an art director. She came as creative director adjacent. She was just somebody trying to make it happen. And I think what's great about what we'll share with you today in our relationship is that she was somebody who was kind of where you were in some places. Some of you are a little bit advanced, but she's kind of come through and seen, identifying, wow, that's something I want to do, and then showing how that can happen. So her story, I think, is kind of an amazing one.
And hitting a wall a lot, a lot of struggle to get there. Let's see what's next.
I don't
Clow?
know. I don't know.
Might be next.
Okay, so that's
Okay.
Lee Clow. I'm sure you guys are familiar with his work. Now you talk about Lee.
Okay, so I guess my journey to become a creative director happened about 5 years ago. I had an idea with 2 other people called the Pepsi Refresh Project, and I was a creative on it. And we literally got in a room, 3 of us, Chris McNeil, Michelle Lewis, and I, and we're like, okay, we have this idea, and we baked it, and we did website development, everything. And around that time, I got this promotion to ACD, which I'd been looking for and bugging Rob about pretty much every day and begging for and saying, I can do this, like I really want to lead. It's like, are you sure you want to lead? You could just be a creative and I'll pay you to be an ACD-ish, and you'll keep advancing that way and keep making, because that's what you're really good at. I'm like, no, I want to guide the work, I want to lead teams, I want to do this and this and this. And I think being kind of put on that stage all of a sudden, so basically we sold in the Refresh Project to Indra Nui of PepsiCo. And I remember, someone put on my calendar meeting with Lee Clow. And I was like, oh boy, okay. So it was a meeting in his office, and he's like, okay, you're an ACD now. And I felt like I was being anointed. And I trust you. We need more art director leaders here. I want you to take this project and build this team and make it great. This is a huge digital idea for our network. This is something big. And I literally had the fear of God. I was like, I can't screw this up. This has to be amazing, not only as a creative, but also like this new role of, okay, I inherited a team of 22 people. That was when our Pepsi team was at its biggest. My peers, people that I've been working alongside, all of a sudden I had to kind of reach a place where I could talk to them as somewhat of a leader and learn.
Boss lady.
And somewhat find my own footing, but also step away from behind my monitor. I was a really good art director, and all of a sudden it's such a different role. And I remember a couple months in, I was so petrified of failure that I just became a raging bitch. And I remember, there was this one woman who I still thank like all the time, because it was kind of a fork in the road for me, who sat me down a couple months in and said, you know what, no one's liking working with you. You're good creative. You have this great idea, but no one can stand being in a room with you. And I didn't realize how much my fear was guiding me to make these kind of abrasive calls and just not really draw on the strengths around me or be able to galvanize people, speak, to them in a way that they wanted to hear instead of a motivation from my own ego. And so it was kind of like one of the things the theme we'll talk about is just how that transition happens, how it becomes less about you and your own fears and more about the greater, and really stepping outside, and what does that mean? Because as a creative person, you get promoted and you make strides in your career because you had a great layout, or you had a great digital idea, or you had a great this, and it's sort of all about you, and then it becomes so much bigger. And that is such a rocky road. I think it was the hardest year of my career, was that first year as an ACD, because I wanted to live up to this guy's, charge, and also draw on everything I'd known. And I reached out to Rob. I still reach out to Rob all the time for guidance, and just especially in those first few years.
Well, I think one of the keys here is that Xanthe had to go from the maker to the leader. So one of the things as you guys start to make the transition is that you have to understand that a lot of the skills that got you noticed to be a creative director are not always the skills you need to succeed as a creative director. So yes, if you are a great concept person, and yes, if you're very good with language, and yes, if you're a great visual person, and yes, if you know a lot of places to find inspiration, all that stuff is great, but you're going to need some other skills. And one thing that I think Lee's taught us directly is that it's maker and leader. It's not either or. You have to do both, and I think Karen Costello hits on that on the film as well. So, in your worlds, as you guys wanted to sign up for this this conversation, and the fact that there's so many people who want to be in this conversation, I think we hit it early on. This is a hot topic. We're hearing some stuff. So I silent confirmation's okay, but feel free to go and yes, I'm experiencing that. So here's what we're hearing. So look at some of these things. Not clear on your role. Again, if there's things that are pressing, raise a hand or whatever. Recognition. As Xanthe pointed out, are you the boss or are you the friend? It's very tough to make that transition.
Is recognition of you and your team, or of you giving you clarify the recognition?
I think it's exactly that. What is it now in this role? Is it about the campaign you sold or the brand? Is it about the client relationship? Is it your team thinks you're the most awesome creative director ever? Is the agency role within the agency? Is it the outside world? I think it all comes to a head in that role, in a leadership role. So what is that? What does it mean for success? How do you get a raise as a creative director? What's success look like?
I think one thing you'll see, we have a good chart for you guys maybe to help prioritize stuff, but it's, in our experience, it seems that a virtuous body of water rises all the boats. So I think if you can be a generous leader, I think you heard it in the film too, the woman from Australia from one of our offices, I think being generous helps. So recognizing others actually winds up getting you recognition. Wait, don't go back. Go back. There you go, a few more. Team issues, we talked about that. Packaging. So we want to bring this up too. This is an important thing because a lot of times you have great ideas, but you can't sell great ideas. So one of the other issues about selling great ideas. So one of the things that creative directors do well is package the work. And that's very simple from, there's the idea. Sometimes you're the spotter. You spot the idea. And then it's you look for ways to think about where the client's going to be. In some ways, the best analogy I can give you is that a lot of times when you're a writer, an art director, a young creative, you're playing checkers. You're just trying to make that next move. But as a creative director, you start to play chess. Think 2 moves ahead. Think a meeting ahead. Try to think a little bit about what's in the client's mind. So as you guide the work, not just to please the client, but to achieve this higher thing that both you and the client want. It's not just about doing what the client wants. It's about doing what the client never dreamed possible. That's a good tweet. I thought someone tweet that. What does success look like? Again, I think that's very important for you guys as creative directors. You have to know what success looks like. Sometimes you have a project like Pepsi Refresh project that has to be front page news. It's gonna be this giant thing. Sometimes it's a turd, and you have to acknowledge the turd and just say, you know what, guys, this is not the greatest assignment ever, but we have to make it the best it can be. But as the creative director, you have to direct your resources. So if it is a turd assignment, don't throw all your good stuff on the turd. Make the turd happen quickly, move on, so you can move on to the good stuff. You can tweet that one too, I think.
Is there anything else that you guys don't see on this list that sort of you came to the session to hear more about that we can kind of cover off on Taylor to anything particular?
You mentioned it's about spotting the idea, but is it also about finding the ideas or making a decent idea better? Or is it always good receiving?
Well, wouldn't that be great, huh? I think that's a great point. Yeah, very often the kernel will be there, and the team might not even know. We had this discussion last night, and Xanthe was saying that sometimes she has to go off and just write. Let's try to write to get to the idea, just write a bunch of pages. But I think for a creative director, I think the worst creative directors, the ones that I've had that really have not been good, you would present the work and they'd be like, No, you don't have it.
Yeah.
I'm going to lunch. So it's your problem. Yeah. And I think we've always lived in a world where we're looking, I don't know about you, but I come into the room, I'm like, please be amazing.
Yeah.
I don't come in like
Yeah.
with the teams like, you know, I'm going to crack it. You know, some of these guys who I work with know that. And sometimes in your kind of please be amazing, like you will find it in a little thing.
And that's actually one of the things I asked Lee when he sat me down that time. I said, so, you know, I have one question for you. How do you spot, because Shai was sort of famous for wallpapering the walls with, you know, thousands of ideas. How do you walk into these rooms and point to the one piece of paper and know that's it? And he said, well, you know, he's so humble. He goes, well, I don't want to kill everything. So I try to look for the one good thing. And, you know, it just stuck with me because it's such a human truth. You know, your teams are your equals, you know, you're working together to collaborate. The best thing you can do is find something and learn how to build on it in a way that doesn't feel like you're steamrolling what they brought you, and that encourages, and you also have to read the room. You have to constantly be looking at their faces going, that team does not want to hear anymore. Like, they might be at their limit for the day, they might have 10 projects that are kept them up all night, and they're just presenting to you that one thing. So it's like, you just sort of have to constantly be adjusting, I feel like, and reading, and just looking for feedback in that way, because otherwise, just, you know, creativity is like this delicate little glass egg, and you just don't want to smash it. And it can happen when you don't expect it. And then you can get, you know, Rob and I were talking about getting the flaming texts from creatives. They're like, my idea died, or why'd you kill that? Or, you know, and you're like, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to make it better. You know, so then sometimes you go in and you really do just, I always look for the good stuff and try to find those kernels and definitely build on them.
One thing Lee did though is that he would sort of storm around first, like, I don't like that, that sucks, that's terrible. Yeah. So you really did feel bad. And then when the one thing was a little germ, you were like, oh, but he liked that.
Yeah, he did a fair amount of time off the wall too.
Here's one other question before we go on. We'll do more questions later, but if it's a burning one.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, in my current role, creative leadership came quite organically within my team. But now I'm creative directing outside partners and other teams on larger projects, and I find that quite hard because those personal relationships aren't as deeply established.
Yeah, you're screwed. Well, I guess I would say I would hold that thought for a second because we're going to show you an interesting little. No, we're going to come back to it. No.
Burning.
I'm the creative director. I'm telling you, no, not now. We'll come back to it though, I promise. All right, so you heard a little bit about what's a creative. No, we will. We'll come back to it. Like, what is a creative director? So again, you heard a number of different pieces in that film. So we wanted to put some stuff down on paper that we thought were kind of key words about what a creative director is. And again, you're hearing it organically in our conversation. So certainly leader, a creative, and you need somebody with ideas. Editor, which we're going to come back to. We had a deep discussion about that last night. Cheerleader. I mean, you guys really have to understand that you are the engine of your entity. If you're an agency, if you're on the client side as a creative director, you are the engine.
You can't say thank you or you're awesome enough. And I'm learning that as a parent now, and I have a two-year-old. And Rob, you know, Rob sort of taught me that, you know, he ended every email with thank you. He also said he complimented when it was really good, and he was effusive with that. You can't use too many exclamation points. I truly believe that creative people are always hungry for, you know, what is going to feed them, and they feel like someone supports them and believes in them. You know, just looking at my 2-year-old daughter and watching her toddle around, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, I'll catch you if you fall, but I also am going to cheerlead you to death because I know you're going to go faster and farther and better. So.
Thank you. That was awesome. No, one good thing to know about that, and we'll come to that. Just hold your questions for 1 second. This is something I also teach our clients too. I think you always have to start with what's working. Always start with what's working. Then you can be demonic and destroy hopes and dreams. Right, Felicia? This happens all the time with us. You know, then I think you can really go in and like beat the crap out of the work. Not the person, but beat the crap out of the work. But then you need a little light at the end of the tunnel. So start with what's working, destroy in the middle, and rebuild on the back end. I think that's, we didn't have that as a slide, but it just struck me as pretty good. Curator and editor, I think, are tied. We're going to come back to that in a second. Inspiration, I think, is really important. And I'll tell you a story about that in a second. And then Jedi Master, I don't know, I don't really know what that is, but people often say, oh, Jedi Master. I think that means like you sort of will the mind control thing. Well, let's talk about editor and curator. So you had a piece last night that you were telling me about that role.
I think that's actually sort of I think the last phase of what I'm working on right now is just being the best editor I can be. I'm still struggling with like, what does it mean to go from maker to leader, and then to leader when you're in with the teams all the time, to my role now as Chief Creative Officer, where I'm really going to be playing more of an editorial role with, you know, going in a new business pitch, are we bringing in 3 campaigns or 1 campaign? You know, what are the final big calls that we're going to be making? And so I guess I'm still, you know, in full transparency, just getting more and more comfortable with that as a real job, is that editor is really powerful and is such a crucial part of it. Because that's a lot of times also what Rob would do within Chiat. I mean, you often had 17 teams working on a brief, a big brief, and it's like, okay, there's a lot of great ideas. What's the one idea, or what are the 3 ideas that we're going to walk in with, and having confidence with that. And also, we were talking about having distance from the work. So, you know, a lot of times I'm in the trenches and I'm helping make it and craft it, and sometimes I'll be crafting it up until I walk into a new business pitch, and that's not the healthiest thing. I need a day. I'm the kind of person who I need 24 hours to kind of sit with the work and go, what are we really bringing in and leaving out? And I need to carve out that time. So it's really important that you guys as creative directors allow yourself, whether it's locking yourselves in a room, bless you, and saying, you know, no account people, no planners, please don't bother me for 3 hours. I need to sit with this work and look at it and make sure I'm making the right decision for the agency, for the brand, and just buying yourself that time.
So I think that question of when you've got peers and then you rise and you're the boss in some way, and that issue of boss or friend or a creative director versus maker, the editor piece and the curator piece is a very natural way to do that separation. And I think you can tell your teams and your peers, guys, I need you to come up with the ideas, and I'm going to help craft them and lead the client there. And I think it's important to say that, because the people are going to be like, no, I want your job. No, they don't want your job. They're much better at the idea making, and you're going to make the hard calls. And if you need like an image, like that guy on the chef guy, what's his name? Gordon Ramsay. Like, he's a real creative director. He comes in, no, the square plate is ugly. Use the round plate. You know, that silverware is too big. That's your job. When Tom Ford was at Gucci, he was a creative director. No, that's an ugly shirt. No, that's a nice shirt. I like your shirt. No, but in general, you know, like if you need some images, you know, people like that, you know, that's what they do. Betsy Johnson, that's what she did. That was her job. No, it's going to be, you know, crazy pink. Done. So that's a way to separate on that. I think the last piece on inspiration, I'll just give you two pieces on that. I think it's your job as the creative director to also bring stuff to the teams. Like, show them things that you think is interesting, not in a way like, oh boy, we should have done that. Because I think that's demoralizing. But I think if you can share stuff like, this looks pretty amazing, you know, or look at this thing, or you know, have a blog. I think, you know, blogs are very, you know, passive-aggressive ways to get your, you know, your opinion out in the world in a way that feels generous. No, but it really is kind of amazing, because I think you can bring things to people and then refer them to that blog, and then they're like, then they see it in a way that works for them. You really have to think about them. Metal potential. Okay, so I think this is a big chunky theory that we work with, that we've been developing in our world. And this is that, you know, before you can move forward, you have to turn upside down. And here's what this means. And this next chart, these next few charts are probably really like the most important if you're going to take away anything. No, not that one. I don't like that one. That one. Okay, so take a second to look at this one. This, in the shortest hand, is the difference between a creative and a creative director. So recall your life when you are a rising star and all you care about is me, 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 me. It's got to be your idea, it's got to be your typeface, it's got to be your music selection, it's got to be your place to get coffee. You know, and then maybe you think about your client. Then maybe, you know, the brand is important, but it's more important that, like, that your idea gets done, and the brand's gonna have to come along for the ride, and those management people need to make my idea happen. If they don't make it happen, they suck. And then at the end, you're like, yeah, maybe this agency could be successful, whatever. I want to join an agency that's already successful, so I don't have to worry about that, because I can focus on my stuff and my buck. Is that?
Yep.
Does anyone remember those days? Anyone still living in those days? A few of us? Okay, good. I'm not. What happens is what happens when you become a creative director is that you totally go upside down. The best creative directors, and again, starting with us together with Lee, I mean, we watched this happen with other great creative directors that we've worked with. They put, not the agency brand, they put the brand they're working on first. If you read the Jobs biography and you start to really look at the Chiat relationship to Apple, this was about putting Apple above Chiat in so many instances. Not always, but in so many. And it starts to happen over and over and over again. And when you put the brand first, and we'll get to even the deeper detail on this, a lot of things can happen. But first and foremost, they're the people who are paying your salary. You know, one thing, it's very pragmatic. You know, you really think about the brand. They're the ones who are paying you. But more importantly, you're trying to make them famous. You're trying to do amazing things on behalf of your client. And any client who sees a creative director who they know is working as hard as they are to make their brands famous, they give you the benefit of the doubt. It's like I know it seems very obvious, but we don't always do that. And when you make that transition from creative to creative director, it is a total reverse. The second thing is the agency. Xanthe said it in the film. He thinks about the collective consciousness of the agency. You start to think about not only you obsessing over the brand or the brands that you're working on, you start to look left and right. You start to go, wait a minute, is like what we're doing, you know, even in this presentation, does this represent the agency well? You know, is this typeface good enough? You know, is this deck smart enough? You know, you really start to think about how we're going into this meeting, not just how I'm going in to sell my stupid spot. You don't live that way anymore. And if you start to do the first two, the last thing comes along. But if you really have to think about your individual agenda last. And when you start to have a team that thinks brand, agency, and then you, BAY, this sort of, you know, what I call basics, you start to move an agency in the right direction. So that's kind of the big framework. I don't know if you want to add any texture.
No.
You like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Xanthe makes the best charts. So we've broken this down even further. So Xanthe, I don't know, I love the way you explain this. Do you want to take them through even deeper?
So yeah, it kind of builds on the last one, but you know, as a creative, you're thinking about yourself. As a creative director, you're thinking about, you know, we as the consciousness of your whole team. Creative, you're thinking about my book, and these are when you're functioning at your highest, and you can kind of like come back to this. I've come back to it a lot as a kind of a guidepost, and also sort of if I have to make a hard decision, I can justify why I'm making it. If, you know, I have to kill someone's campaign, or I have to, you know, God forbid, let somebody go, is it, you know, what are those, and those are the really hard leadership things. So, you know, my book versus what's best for the client. As a creative, you're thinking about how do you stand out, and as a creative director, how do you unify all the ideas, package all the ideas, so you're not just presenting a ton of tactical pieces, which is also the way our landscape's changing. Now, presentation decks are 40 pages long with, oh, here's a Twitter idea, and then there's this, and then there's this, and most clients are coming from more of an old school branding, positioning place where it's like they want to know the bigger idea. So what's that unifying idea, and forcing yourself to get there, even if your teams aren't ready to do that or don't know how to do that. So lots of ideas, and then most importantly, finding the idea. You know, what is the single strongest thing that, you know, you could look back in a year and say, I'm glad our agency did this, this was right for this brand. A lot of times I'll write case studies in the future to help myself, help the exercise, like was that truly a good enough idea to work this hard for? It's like, what is the story? And then, you know, as a creative, you're thinking about now, creative director, you're always thinking in the future. How will all these decisions impact the future? And awards don't change. They actually, I think, even become more important in a way as a creative director, because sometimes as a creative, salaries aren't huge. You know, you can kind of get by, you can sort of, some agencies are big enough you can hide if you're not that great. But as a creative director, it's you, and you have to lead your team. And also, the creatives that will want to work for you because you're the kind of creative director that will fight and will get them great work for their book. You know, I'm queen of saying, this will be great for your book, get this one done. You know, like just helping them sort it out, because I feel like, you know, that's what they're in it for, and I was in it for that too, and I still am. So.
But I think as you really start to become a creative director versus a creative, I don't know, in my experience, it's been like the best way to change the way you're thinking about things. And ultimately, it's going to be great for you, and it's going to be great for the brand, and it's going to be great for the team, and it's going to be great for the agency. But it's very hard to go from the left side to the right side, really hard. And especially as creative people, you know, we're obsessed with ourselves and our ideas, and we're always thinking about our stuff, and you know, we're always the, you know, kind of center of our own personal narrative, and you have to get beyond that. It's not going to be easy. It's rewarding though. So brand agency you. It's a very simple format. And sometimes, you know, if you're with a client, you're having, you know, a good kind of intimate conversation. It's nice to say to these clients, hey, by the way, this is how we're running the agency. You know, I remember, you know, telling Jill, you know, one of our Pepsi clients, I said, this is our philosophy. This is why, you know, when we fight for something, we're not fighting selfishly. We're fighting on your behalf. We're trying to make, you know, what you never dreamed possible. Well, I think it's a good question on the user and the audience. The user and the audience lives within the brand. When we say brand, and again, I think this is a very specific point. This is not doing just for the client. This is not old school Mad Men, whatever the client wants. And I think this is the best phrase I heard early on in my career. Don't give the client what they want, give them what they never dreamed possible. And I think when you think about it that way, the audience is inherently baked into that, because the brand, you know, the magic of a brand has to electrify the audience. We've covered a lot of this, which is good. One thing I think that will help you guys is that use the brand to guide all of your decisions. So if you have an issue on a piece of creative and you're fighting with somebody, you just have to say, is this the best for the brand? If you've got a personnel issue with somebody, you can default and say, you know what, I don't think you're right for this brand. Now, what's nice about that is that sometimes if you're in a big enough agency, you can give them new life on a different brand. But if you're running a specific brand, you know, it helps you manage and find the right people. Now, you got to get very clear on the, yeah, we covered this. Oh, no, go back. There's one important thing, sorry. Just go back. Brand versus client, we talked about that. Again, brand, not just solve this woman's issue, solve her Uber issues as a brand. Doing best for the brand, we covered that. But something very important, this is like a, you know, kind of a Lee secret that he once said, you know, he said to us on several occasions, but the secret weapon is to always know more than the client. Know more about the brand's history, know more about where they're going. It's very hard. As agencies, we've lost the intellectual upper hand on clients. But oftentimes when you're in the room and you know something very deep about a client that they might not know, and you say it in a way that's almost very offhanded, they will immediately listen to pretty much everything you say. That's the Jedi mastery. It's really knowing things about the client that they don't know.
Why do you have it as brand versus client?
Because a lot of times when we say do what's right for the brand, creative people go, oh, you're just kissing the client's ass.
Okay.
It's like we have to get beyond Mad Men. Like, we are not here to buy the client's lunch. It's okay to buy them lunch, but we're buying them lunch on behalf to move their brands forward.
Can I ask you a question? When you go to a meeting and you say you know more than the client about the brand.
I never say that to them. I let them experience it.
Okay. Do they ever get defensive about it? Like they have their own team in the room and you made this comment which kind of makes them feel like.
Yeah, you can't make it like obvious that, you know, you just have to know it.
Researching, following their stock price, you know, reading every article you can get your hands on, having a Google alert, stuff I'm sure, you know, 90% of the room already does, but just constantly looking back in their history. Like I have a Burger King archive of historical photos on my personal laptop because I've looked at everyone. Sometimes I draw inspiration for something that they did in their past that connects to where they're going. So it's like you have to be a steward of their brand and love their brand and own it. And like Rob's saying, it's not that you walk around like, oh, I know everything about your brand, you guys know nothing. It's more that it will inform things and it's kind of a back pocket because it shows how invested you are. And if you are truly invested, you tend to do great things and you have those partnerships that they understand how much you care for what their business is.
You know, one good thing, just to build up what Xanthe was saying, one very good thing to do, any brand you work, tell me some brands you guys work on. Throw one out. Rite Aid, what else? Kohl's, AT&T, Taco Bell, Delta. Okay, good. So in a number of these, there's very interesting history. Delta, for example, or even Taco Bell. So one thing to send the planners off doing is have them create a brand attic. Find all the pieces of the brand, and it's all there on the interweb. But have them and have this brand attic, because you can draw from that. It'll either inspire something for the future. It'll help you, move an idea forward. It could be really kind of amazing. For a brand like Rite Aid, I think that'd be very tough. I don't think that's a tough brand to work on. And again, I think, retail is its own animal, and I think. But what's interesting about retail brands is that the customers really, they sort of invent the pop culture of the brand. So I guess you got to use that customer stuff as much as possible. I think that's good. We just talked, just go back a little bit about brand ideas. It helps in this day and age. I don't know, I've been sitting in a lot of meetings lately. There's a proliferation of tactics. Like you need a brand idea. Like I don't know the Rite Aid brand idea, but I know Delta, keep climbing. I mean, I think if you can use that as a touchstone on any one of these tactics, you can always back up the tactic. Hey, this goes back to what we're trying to say with keep climbing. And these are just a few that we've used. I think the best example for me up there is Gatorade, because the marketing directors change and the products oftentimes go through these crazy flavor cycles, and they try to do a lot of innovation. But if we always bring it back to, well, we're helping the athlete. Does this help the athlete? You told me that this new blueberry flavor is really tasty. Does this help the athlete in any way? And when it doesn't help the athlete, it also helps the client go, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't do, blueberry flavored, whatever. So just get clear on your brand idea. On the agency pieces, hello. Hey. Good agencies have a mission. You have something that you stand for. We'll show you some examples in a second. And of course, you have to build a team. And I think Xanthe has done a great job, starting, with a new agency and building a team. But we'll show you some examples. Oh.
And look at, I would also say, start getting really great at looking at portfolios. I work in an agency with 60 people. I am the creative recruiter. Someday, hopefully, we're big enough to afford a real creative recruiter that will help me look at
Some are here.
But I think it's a really important skill. There was a lot of years between the time when I was making a book to sort of shop around and when I was evaluating books. And now it's getting harder and harder because everyone looks really shiny. Everyone looks pretty good. I mean, you could tell a great print book 10 years ago from a not so great print book. Now it's like, well, that was a cool tactic, I think, and that elevator idea was neat, but can this person think big? So it's literally like Chinese water torture going through book after book after book, but it becomes, you really hone your skills so you can spot them when you finally really need to. This is something I've worked on for 2 years. I probably spent the most time. I've interviewed probably 500 people in the last 2 years. I overdid it on the interviews because I just didn't know quite what I was looking for or how to find them. And I needed them desperately to help build this agency and get that great talent, which we're so blessed to get the right people in the door. But it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to hone that skill. So that's one thing that I would encourage you to look at books constantly. So when you're in more of a position of hiring, and as that keeps going, or if you're doing it now, it really is important because it's all about the people you get.
I have no segue, so I'm going to go to this slide. This has probably helped personally me more than almost any other bit of philosophy I heard from anybody in managing creative people and leading agencies. And because it's 3%, I wish it said if she works for you, you work for her. But this was back, when Confucius, was running the 99% conference. And it's a very important idea, though. I think a lot of times it goes back to a lot of creative directors are very imperious, and they're like, you know what, I'm the queen, show me what you got. And if you don't have it, I'm sorry, that's your problem, I'm gone. And I think this is a very different way of working, which is you're trying to help your people bring you the ideas. And this doesn't mean like spoon feeding and being a nudge. I think it just means like really understanding that these people are trying so hard to bring you something amazing. Help them a little bit too.
Yeah, and I think that goes also for their career development. I mean, I always felt like Rob was always trying to make me a better creative leader, and give me all those tools constantly. I feel that from my friends who are, at different agencies that, worked for me when I was at Chiat, and we still talk. It's sort of a similar thing. You keep paying it forward, but it's like it's like your motivations, if it's all about everybody else and their success, you have success yourself. That sort of comes with the territory. And I think every day, how can I make my creatives famous? How can I expose them to the right opportunities? How can I get them to be their own brands so that someday they run their own little agencies, or they become, successful and famous within our agency? Like, that's the dream. It literally is. It's so much fun to watch and grow that and put so much energy into trying to get them in the right rooms, get them on the right projects, put their talents to best use. Like, that's the really, I lived and breathed this one, especially, so.
So just back to brand mission. So I think, these are some agencies that have very clear points of view on how they guide their work. So again, if you're running a brand and you're starting to ascend to run the agency, get very clear on what your position is as an agency. So these are just a few. Disruption has been TBWA's for a long time. BBDO has done the work, I mean, for forever. I mean, going back to when Phil Duesenberry was running the agency. Humankind from Leo Burnett, they look for very human stories and being generous. I think Gray, when Tor Miran left our agency and went to Gray to become the creative director there, he came up with this idea with his team, famously effective, I think is really powerful. And again, when they go to pitch their work, if they're not living up to something that's famously effective, it helps edit the work. This is like, having a tool like this helps you edit the work. And then Xanthe shop, the business of creative, they come in as partners. It's not a normal kind of agency. There's somewhat venture capital people and creative people. It's a very different way of going in. So they pitch on the business of creative as pitch. This is your thing. I always like the count guys and planners.
I think I was a little bit more of a Gollum character where I'd just hide behind my monitor and Callie, lovely account person would come up, what do you want? You can't see it yet, and I think that was a really big transition, and the world's changed a lot. I think people are much more collaborative now. I think just making friends with and teaching younger creatives also to make friends with accountant planning. It's not the enemy. They're not trying to hurt you. They're not trying to not sell your idea. Sometimes they need the tools. You need to arm them with the vocabulary and the words to sell something. They're very rational. A lot of times you have to think. They don't come from your world. They don't know instinctively why something's good or beautiful or amazing, and you have to give them those tools. So I think embracing the whole team is really, and a creative director, I do find more and more really sets the tone of a room. No matter how many rooms I go in, it's not the president, it's not the CSO, it's not the CEO. A lot of times it's the creative, because there's a little bit of magic that people are looking for from this person. So your positivity and your way to embrace everybody else is really will transcend so many things and set the tone. Like, I've noticed if I'm in a bad mood, it's a bad room, and I hate that, and I just work on it every day to try to make sure that I stay positive, and I also bring people along. If I see a junior account person that's sitting in the corner, it's like, hey, what do you think? Involve them in the conversation, and they will fight to the death for you. You have people fighting long after the lights go off and everyone goes home, because they believe in you and they believe in what you're trying to do for the agency. And it can be really powerful. So.
Okay, finally, you. Again, we covered the brand piece. We've covered the agency piece. Now it's you. Now it's what you guys, what you should think about personally, because, it's your life too. So as a creative director, when Xanthe and I were thinking about this presentation, we thought, so what are the things that these guys need to walk out of here, also doing for their careers? So we came up with these 4: thought leadership, getting on juries, getting outside your bubble, and then knowing stuff. So how about I tackle we'll just bubble along here. I think thought leadership is really important. I think a lot of you guys have great points of view on things. Who here has a blog? like a very active. See, as a creative director, you do the semi-blog. Okay, you guys, it's very important that you have some touchstone out there in the world that people know what you stand for, even if it's just the folks in your agency, and even. No, but it should be something that is inspirational. You know, like if you love gnomes, and like you're really into garden gnomes, I think it's okay because people will know that you're.
I have a blog that's very much about. It's much more broad than that. I mean, I've often wondered, and I'm a writer, creative director, but I've often wondered is that Rob was more on my philosophy of finding less integrity.
Well, I think that sounds amazing. Just make the headlines big, because as writers we write too much. But have some big chunky headlines. No, it's very important, and I think that try to get published. There's so many places. The Clio Awards want to hear from you. The One Show wants to hear from you. Jim Cooper from Adweek is here. He sort of wants to hear from you. No, these guys definitely do. These guys, they want. Yeah, absolutely. They want. CA, a fantastic place, which is. I used to love the annuals. I miss the annuals. We're too digital now. But I think it's very important for you guys. Excellent. Woo!
I've been carrying mine around boxes
Excellent.
for years.
But the publications, you have great platforms now. The clients, I think, are out there. They want to see that, you're famous. They want you to walk around. Oh, that's the person, who's got the Learn from Obstacles blog. I mean, I think it's very important. And I think your teams, more than anybody, they want to see what you're all about. Because sometimes, in a very big agency, they may only see you for, 30 minutes. Yeah.
This is just more kind of.
Mm. Yeah. Why not? I mean, as long as you're not plotting against the government, I mean, I don't think it's going to be an issue, Greetings from local ISIS chapter. No, I mean, that's going.
This is just more piling onto what you said, but I read this book right now by Pete Carroll, Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl winning coach, and he said this sort of pivotal point in his coaching career. He'd always kind of had this philosophy in his head of success, being a winner. But when he actually had this epiphany of putting it down on paper and living by it, and this is before so you could socialize it via Twitter, but literally just sharing it. But literally the act of writing it down was this turning point in his coaching career. That was going like this, but then it went like this.
Listen, you can start a blog. You don't have to turn it on to the public. Just start writing it for yourself, and you'll see. Want to cover juries real quick?
Oh yeah, that actually is great. I just judged Clio's and judging the International Andy Awards. I mean, I've been really fortunate to get invited to some really fantastic shows, but I learned so much there. You meet so many different judges. You can sit and talk about teams and how it works. I met an amazing Australian judge who was in the video, this girl with glasses. And we were comparing notes on juniors and what to expect from juniors and how much we're paying juniors. And wow, her juniors are winning Cannes Lions and my juniors aren't yet. So, that's a great thing. I think the exposure to the work, and also just, it's like a study hall. You get there and you sit in the room and you watch all the stuff, and it's almost forced to. You take in the whole industry and you come back so inspired. So even if it's a small show, it can be whatever, local shows. I learned so much doing that. I do them as much as I can.
And now, listen, as the 3% growing to 11%, they want you. The shows want 50-50 juries. It's never been a better time to be a woman creative director in our business to get on a jury.
The first time ever at Clio's did 50-50.
I am from the board of revenue DC. When I moved to DC, I wasn't at an agency, I was freelancing. The only way I could meet my training, which is kind of odd because I'm not really creative there. But it was a good opportunity because that meant I met people I needed to know, not my peers. And I am
Look at that. Look at that.
Bring me your card.
Yay. Yay. Perfect.
CA is always looking, and they still publish the annual. All right, we're just gonna move it along here on 3 and 4 here. Between get outside your bubble and know stuff, I think Xanthe brought up something very important. You know, she's reading the stock coverage of the clients that she's working on. I don't think you could say that a few years ago. We're not saying you have to become a financial genius, but it's important to understand all the things that are going on in your client's world. So do that and just start to acquire things in life, know things.
Meet people outside of creative.
Yeah.
Because your clients and your next pieces of business will come from, your project manager's wife who works for so-and-so knows so-and-so. So just know other people besides our little world.
We're only halfway done. No, I'm kidding. We brought in Lincoln. I mean, one thing that's really important is that, as Xanthe said, you guys represent the agency. So when you think about Abe Lincoln and the country's coming apart and no one wants to be his friend and the world is exploding, Lincoln walked into every room there's not a problem. He wasn't Pollyanna, but he walked in really confidently. As a creative director, it's your job. You've got to come into the room you're the one who makes it happen. Even if you are afraid inside, even if you're oh my God, our idea sucks, I can't believe, we blew it. People are going to look to you. As Xanthe said, you set the tone in the room. So Lincoln up. This is another one. I can't believe Dylan playing bass. I was hoping he was playing 6-string. But the deal with Dylan is that he's not the best guitar player, but he always finds the chord. So you're not always going to know everything. You're not always going to know the answer, but you just have to keep strumming till you find the chord. That's the best metaphor I can give you on when you kind of go, I don't know. You have to just kind of keep going with it, because people are going to look to you to keep going with it. They're not going to, if the creative director is suddenly the person in the room that doesn't have the answer, everyone's like, we're screwed. So everyone's going to look to you to really be the leader, so you're going to have to keep strumming, and then eventually, you're going to hit that right chord, and everyone's going to go, oh my God, that sounds amazing. So, success looks like for you guys, you've got great work coming out of your agencies. You've got a true team, that you're building. When we say true team, just remember that slide. You've got account people, you've got planners, you've got the digital people, you've got the media people. Everybody is moving towards the same direction. Not everybody has to love each other, but everybody has to love the goal. Everybody has to love where you're going. And then incredible loyalty. People who really will run through walls for you when you ask them to work Saturday nights, when you ask them to do impossible things, that they'll do that for you. All right, so it's always fun being at these seminars, and you feel really inspired, and you're like, I'm going to go take over the world, and then the weekend happens. And then Monday rolls around, and you're like, so Xanthe and I thought we'd just give you a couple of Monday tools, just a couple things to try on Monday. And again, I hope there are pieces here that you can start to incorporate, but here's some specific Monday things. You want to do the first one?
Yeah, this is just we did 5x5s. I dreaded them for a while, and then I came to love them as a creative director. 5x5s is just bring 5 ideas by 5 p.m. You ask your teams. It's not too hard. Anyone can think of 5 ideas. It just gets the juices rolling, and it also doesn't set the bar so high. Instead of we did 360 reviews, and someone was like, you put so much pressure on us. And it's like, well, I want you to be amazing. But sometimes you just need to set the bars. Let's just make something. It doesn't have to be award-winning yet. We'll just get it out there. So that's a really useful tool. Do 5x5s if you need to generate. And then you can do them every day, which is nice, instead of having a 5 days and wait for a creative review. And then you're like, ooh, none of the work's really working. Uh-oh, meeting's on Monday. Now everyone's working the weekend. At least you've seen stuff, and then it becomes a conversation rather than a presentation to you. So
3 pages is something. There's a woman who's got a book called The Artist's Way. So you have to know stuff. Julia, I forget her last name. Julia Cameron. Did you read the book? Mm-hmm. What'd you think? It's pretty amazing, right? This is a brilliant book. You should read this book called The Artist's Way. And she's got this thing where she just says, write 3 pages in the morning. It's a meditation, as it were. If we're in San Francisco, so it's a meditation. It's really 3 pages. Write 3 pages, and it can just be free form. That's the meditation part. For your teams, when they get stuck on something, so it's a tough brief on Rite Aid, to do, I don't know, a Valentine's Day promotion. Have them, even if they're not writers, write 3 pages. And I promise you, when they turn in the 3 pages, you will see a brilliant sentence that came in out of nowhere that you will circle, and you go, okay guys, here's the idea. 5 by 5. We need 5 ideas on this sentence at the end of the day. So 3 pages is good. The last one is called the 180, and very quickly is that if you're working on something and you're stuck, think about something that is the complete opposite of what you need to do, something that is totally inappropriate. So if you're working on a minivan, you make it a man van. If you're working on a Valentine's Day, think about breaking up with somebody. It's working in the opposite, and sometimes you find that the real idea wants to come out of the opposite, and you've been trying to be, too positive from the get-go. All right, so we're almost done here. I can see they're saying, okay, good. Now for your questions, because you've had them all the way through. We'll take a few. CD and ACD. That's a good one. Well, I think it starts with clarity. So you have to be very clear, like what's the ACD's role and what's the CD's role. So I remember, in Shia, we would do these CD and ACD Bibles. And in ACD, we tended to have on bigger pieces of business. It's a very tough role. So if you don't have a big agency, I wouldn't have one. I think ACD is a very tricky role. You need an ACD when you need somebody who does day-to-day. If creative director is more every other day or week to week, ACD is day-to-day. That's what the best thing. All right, 2 more. Lift it up to the brand level. Why don't you say we're a brand-led agency? Why don't you say, it's not about us. Take them to just say, hey, we should put the brand first, agency second, and then individual agendas for third. Let's get out of this cat fight between agency-led. That sounds like ridiculous. Because it makes you not want to work with the account people. Like, oh, we're account guy-led agency. Like, oh, okay, so we're boring. And no, but honestly, I think it leads to like very rancorous relationships, and I would raise it up. Like let's be a great idea agency or a brand agency or something bigger. Okay, 2 more.
A ton about teams. I know that is the most part for creative design. What I've heard a lot about is one of the things I heard before was packaging. And can you talk a little bit about the client relationship side and like what happens when you have clients that have inner turmoil, they're indecisive, they love an idea, and then they hate it.
Never really experienced that. You?
I guess like managing almost the team spirit when you have a crazy client, or what?
Okay, well maybe it's just like you just acknowledge they're crazy. I was thinking, how do you manage the crazy client?
How do you manage the crazy?
Yeah.
That's the topic of our next seminar.
I guess for me, and it's such a good question because there are a couple.
It is a good one.
It is a good one. I think there's a lot in a creative director's role that's protecting. So like a lot of blocking and tackling. Like you guys don't need to see this or hear this because this person is cuckoo crazy, and they're making bad decisions. And I'm gonna work. I tell the team sometimes it's like you may see me leave the building at 6. I go home and feed my daughter and talk to my husband for half an hour. But I'm often on the phone or on email with clients, talking them off ledges, giving them, working with our chief strategy officer to give them cheat sheets to understand ideas. But I feel like mostly my job is to protect and block so that teams don't get really demoralized by hearing the in and out of every decision. account forwarding emails is like, no way, I can't stand it. It doesn't happen. We just go, you gotta interpret, you gotta guide, you gotta work with me. I don't want teams to see junior art directors and creative directors see clients being their worst. Because you do have these great moments in this business. There are incredible opportunities to change things. And if I were to live and die by every crazy, stupid comment I've got in my life, I wouldn't get out of bed. But I think that's the job, to filter really as best you can. And then also be transparent. When it comes to a moment where you can no longer block anymore, you're honest. And you say, you know what? Either I failed you guys, our clients failed you, this direction is wrong. We'll talk about it as a group, it doesn't leave the building. We reiterate that what stays here isn't tweeted, isn't photographed, it isn't whatever, but be honest, at the end of the day, you're human and you're fighting really hard every single day to make great ideas happen. And sometimes it doesn't work out. So I find that teams understand that a little bit more, and sometimes, I think, again, to go back to sort of the account partnership thing, something I've worked on a little bit is to make them a hero, is give them a role where they can succeed in front of our teams. Because if they see, sometimes I'll forward an email from our president where she's fighting for a piece of work. And I'll say, check out what she did here, because you don't see that side of her. She seems like this tough broad, but she's actually really trying to get your ideas through. So I let them try to find a way for them to be stars within our own agency, and somehow that sort of brings it. Anyway, I went on a tangent, but
that's good. All right, last one, then we got to go.
Xanthe, earlier when you were talking about being promoted to ACD on some project, did you experience any, or how do you handle in coming up as a creative team member, when you're advancing and your partner's not, or they're firmly in the doer land and you're getting more into the management land? How do you recommend handling those dynamics?
It's something that even talking about it makes me have a pit in my stomach. Some of my best friends in this business are creative still, and they're fucking amazing creatives. They work at Wyden and Kennedy and all over, and I'm jealous sometimes of the stuff they're doing, and I'm sitting in a meeting. I think handled with transparency, honesty, authenticity. One time during this refresh project promotion thing, I remember I completely just lost my shit at my friend John's desk, who helped us come up with an idea. He's like, "What's happening to you?" I'm like, "I just feel so much pressure." I just and I started crying in front of him, and he's like, "It's okay." He was still an art director. He's doing great in his career, but I was honest with him. I'm like, I'm trying to lead this and get this work out of you. He needs more time, and I'm trying to project manage it, and it's just all not working. So I broke down and I was honest about it. I guess it's just finding those things and being sensitive to people's egos. It's such a fragile business, and just approaching each day with compassion, knowing that people are coming from a story, So I guess that's sort of how I do it. I don't know.
Well, good. Well, thank you for your rapt attention, and you can email us and continue.